Welcome to another edition of ISG Smart Talks, the podcast where Steve Hall and I will discuss the different ways that technology is transforming business. Our objectives for the podcast are pretty simple. We want to entertain, to educate, and to inspire our listeners. And we hope to do that today as we discuss what is a really huge topic, how the way we work is being transformed by technology. Now, ISG hosts a number of prestigious events around the world, and one of them is the Future Workplace Summit. We discuss at that summit the way work is being transformed by technology, where we work, how we work, what we will do in the future, why we work. We discuss all of those topics, and Steve and I are going to delve into those today. So Steve, let's start there. So the way we work has already started to be transformed by technology, arguably. So we've had the advent of the PC 20 or so years ago, and then of course the mobile, which has changed the way we work, the development of networks, which have enabled us to work from different places, of course digital, which is changing things. But there is a school of thought which says actually the businesses that we work in, that our clients work in, haven't actually transformed that much. They still sit in the same type of desks and sit in front of PCs doing the same type of things that they did 10 years ago. Whereas in manufacturing, in factories, in industry, we've seen automation technology and robotics completely transform the way that work is done. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think things have transformed significantly in the businesses that we work in over the last decade or so, or not?
You know, it's interesting though, because PCs have now been around 40 years. I mean, if we go back to the first PCs of the late 70s and the early 80s and the office automation of the mid 80s, it's been an extended period. And to a large degree, if you go back to the early email situations and IBM profs and different things, you know, it changed how people communicated to some degree, but most of the time you would go to a separate room, check your email, get what you had to do and do it. It wasn't completely integrated. Certainly through the 80s and the 90s, things became extremely integrated on how you started working with email, especially, and office products and other, PC type products. I think to a large degree, though, it started to change how we worked with individuals. Right? We didn't do dictation anymore. We didn't pick up the phone and call people. I could be sitting in the office right next to you and I would send you an email. So it started to change how we communicated with individuals, which I don't think was good. Then you kind of fast forward and you think through all the technologies that's been integrated into the office environment. So take the big cube farms of the 90s that were fantastically knocked all down by the mid 2000s, right? But then we went through the big open table concepts and we thought that would facilitate broader collaboration. But all you saw was people emailing each other sitting across the table from them, all with their really super nice headphones on. What were the headphones that you got before the
Europhones?
The Europhones.
Yeah, have you got a pair of those yet?
I haven't got those yet, but I'm going to get a pair. But that's what you see. And now there's even studies about the office space itself. So starting with the physical environment, how should you work in an office, especially for knowledge workers? What does that environment consist of? And, you and I are lucky because we get to see so many offices of so many great clients that we have. And I think the best offices, just looking at from the physical space, is where they really integrated technology to make whether that meeting, that interaction important for that piece. So if you go into a meeting and you say it's with 15 people and with a deck or 15 people and a whiteboard, the lights can communicate down. The lights change, the mood changes, big screens come up that are visually appealing, all these different things where it's integrated the environment to make it better for us, to make it more meaningful for how we work. Those are simple examples, but if you look at the underlying technology, it's actually quite complex. You've got, applications that understand what a meeting is. You've got all the scheduling software to understand how they're going to be booked. You've got the technology that associates with how to adjust the room and the smart building and bring all those together. Plus, you got the psychology of what it really means to run a great meeting or a great discussion. So with knowledge workers, I think it's really changed. I think with knowledge workers, it's interesting, though, because so much of what we do is process data. And quite frankly, machines process data much better than humans, right? We all know that. So as we talk about machine learning or AI, we'll get into that. But think about what simple things in the office have meant for things like Tableau or Visual BI or Domo, where all of a sudden, because we've digitized the workplace and we've started thinking, we now have tools that can connect dots for us much better than we could individually, right? We can start seeing things in new ways where there were connections there before, but we didn't always have the right insights to draw those connections. And so I think even the software itself has really added to the workplace of the future.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I understand and recognize what you've said. I think the technology is there, but we're not necessarily always in a place to be able to use the technology that's available. So if I think about your example of just putting audio visual in place at a meeting, think how long it takes for meetings everywhere around the world that are happening every second. You walk into the room, you plug your laptop into the AV screen, nothing happens. You're pressing the right keyboard combinations, nothing happens. You have to get the AV guy to come in and fix it for you. The amount of time that's wasted trying to make that work. And I remember sitting in, the big Cisco video conference rooms back in the day, thinking, my God, this is all gonna transform things. But we still waste 5 or 10 minutes kicking off a meeting trying to get the screen to work. So I think the technology is there, but we're not necessarily always set up to benefit from that technology. I also think, if I think back to my degree that I started in 1989 and finished in 93. I remember then and I did a degree in IT effectively. Then doing projects around the paperless office and what the paperless office would look like back then. And we still don't have paperless offices now, right? We still rely on paper. We're still in this mode where we've got part digital and part analog. We're not quite there. As we were just discussing before we started this podcast, there are startups that can do insurance claims in 3 seconds. 3 seconds. From the time you make a claim to the payment going into your bank. It's possible. The technology is there, but practically, when we're actually living and working in businesses which are not 100% digital, you've got paper-based analog stuff and you've got digital stuff, and making them all work together so it's completely seamless is still it will still take a while, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because I think the work environment, we've gone through this period where we segregated work. And not only did we segregate work, we segregated people doing different types of work, right? So we used nonverbal communications primarily, to work through things. Actually, we use written communications to do that, email, other things, not nonverbal. We miss the nonverbal verbal aspect of it. I think part of what I see with Blue Jeans and some of the other new video conferencing platforms is to bring that back so you can have more of a natural conversation. If I look at some of the web conferencing systems that were out there as one example for what it meant, whether it's Skype, whether it was Cisco, any number of them that have been over the years, it's been really difficult to get that interaction that's so important to communications and bring that back in.
Yeah.
You could argue some people don't want that. They're fine with the quick text. They're fine with the quick messages. We both use IM all the time for certain things. But I think it does miss that human element within the workplace that's so important.
Yeah.
And I think one thing technology is doing or has to continue to do is make sure that you keep that connection within the workplace.
Yeah.
It's easy to have we'll picture bots running across the office space, but automation's doing a lot of the work that we need done.
Yeah.
But being able to feed that back to us in ways that we can understand, and then be able to articulate that and clarify that and have meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
Whether that's with marketing or finance or claims or whatever the work is that the knowledge workers do, it's quite important to the overall experience.
Yeah, no,
and how people feel about their quality of work and integrating that with technology.
Yeah, I think as the workforce changes, and we'll have the millennials in the workforce, and we both have kids. I've got 2 teenagers one at university, the other one going into university, and they will be coming into the workforce fairly soon, I hope anyway. They'll be entering a workforce where we communicate predominantly, of course, we have face-to-face and verbal communication, but we still use email a lot. Most of the businesses that we work in will use some form of email client for 60, 70, maybe even 80% of their communication, right? We still spend a lot of our time doing emails. If I think of the way that my kids work, they don't use email at all, right? They use Instant Messenger, as you say. They use Snapchat. They use WhatsApp or whatever. Then we ask them to come into a workforce where they're going to have to sit down and understand how to type emails, how to use grammar. You'd hope they'd learn that at school. And so I think we need to try and adapt the tools that we use in our work to the way young people coming into the workforce are used to communicating. And of course, there are examples of Workplace by Facebook or and others that try to do that, but it isn't universally well done yet, I don't think. And even if you use Slack or Yammer as we do, and we've I've worked with both in the past, what you end up doing is sending messages through those and then replicating on email. You're almost creating work. But so do you agree with that? Do you think the tools we use have to change as youngsters come into the workforce?
Yeah, I think they do. I think collaboration becomes incredibly important. So, you and I were both software developers. So we grew up in sort of the engineering disciplines, and I got my computer science degree as well. It was a very different world. Today, whether it's Slack, HipChat, Yammer, LinkedIn, Skype, whatever, collaboration software becomes incredibly important, and getting quick answers to really help teams, work together more. So yeah, it absolutely becomes a key piece of what they're doing. So if you think about the workplace of the future, certainly you have to have collaboration. I think you've got to have the right set of tools to be able to support that. You have to have strong video conferencing capabilities to allow that. You certainly have to have an integrated PC with voice over IP, whether it's Google Works or OS 365, and we don't want our we don't want to do commercials for anybody or make this about one company.
Other tools are available.
Other tools are available. There are certain platforms that are quite good, that are quite integrated. And I think you've got to have the analytics tools, the Microsoft BIs, the Tableaus, the Domos, the other things that allow you to really visualize the work that we're doing. Yeah. And then, kind of going back to the physical aspects of it, I think there is this sort of smart building concept that you have to have that's integrated, that knows who you are, whether it's through security, whether it's through physical presence, whether it's through your phone. Some of the buildings that we go into are quite complex. Help me navigate to where the meeting is. Yeah. Help me show where things are, as we go through various campuses. Yeah. If you go out to Silicon Valley, you'll see a lot of different technology really integrated in. Everything from bots that greet you at the door, can be a little childish sometimes, to obviously big smart boards and everything else that bring you in. Lots of different technologies that we've done to make it a much more open experience. Even corporate offices, open glass, transparency, all of these things kind of get into the fiber of organizations now, which are quite important. Can you imagine going into an office today with nothing but cubes and offices with the door shut? What would your first impression of that company be?
Absolutely, very negative. So I want to change tact a little bit and start, and we can't have a conversation about the future of work without thinking about automation. So it's been one of the big trends of the last decade. So we talk, we've both been involved in the world of RPA and AI for a while now. So we've seen RPA really come of age, I think, over the last couple of years. We see the major software vendors now being valued in the billions and take significant investment, and have proliferated around the sort of Fortune 500 organizations, where most large companies have now done some form of RPA and are now thinking about how they use AI. But what I've certainly not seen yet is large numbers of jobs being displaced by, let's start with RPA. That was the big concern at the time, right? When you talk about automation, you talk about robots, people think, oh my God, my job's going to be replaced by a robot. And of course, that's what businesses, some of them, wanted to start with. Help me to reduce costs by replacing people. We've got this wonderful RPA software. And that was often part of the objective. But what happens in my experience anyway is we'll do some work for an organization and help them to understand what processes they can automate, which tools to use, how to implement the RPA software, automate some of the processes for them, and then teach them how to automate themselves. And they become more productive, and they've benefited significantly from the use of RPA. And it's automated subtasks, but it hasn't necessarily automated entire tasks. And in most cases, it hasn't led to significant job reduction. It's changed the way people work, and it's led to retraining and upskilling, but it hasn't led to big displacement of jobs yet. Now, what are your thoughts on? I mean, do you agree with that for a start? And is that what you've seen? And do you predict that it will lead to big job displacement in the future?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I do agree in general that it hasn't yet. I think where I would take a slightly different view is I think when we're so involved with technology day to day, and we're a technology research and advisory firm, it's easy to step back and say, oh, that's yesterday's trend, jump onto the next trend. But I think in reality, the last research that I've looked, it's only it's less than 10%. I think it was 7% adoption of RPA across most enterprises when they catalog what are the types of processes that could be automated. So in many ways, we're still at the very early days of automation. Now we have cognitive, we have ML, we have AI, we have deep learning, we have all these variations of what it takes. But the reality is we're still very much at the beginning of it. So when I think about RPA, and we think about, again, the UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, sort of that class of RPA providers, I think even their evaluations have really skyrocketed really just over the last year to 18 months, right? So if you take them to the same period of where a Facebook was or a Netflix was, you'd have to, fast forward 10 years before they really begin to show the profits and things that they're doing. So I think there is a lot of runway left for RPA from that standpoint for clients. And what's going to be interesting, I think we're seeing this continued advancement of Moore's Law, whether it's not only at the chip level now, but at the software level, that I think RPA is going to be becoming blended with cognitive.
Yeah. And
you're going to see more work, actually smart chatbots, smart work being done, which I think will displace more traditional, especially knowledge workers in roles, right? If I take claims processing, let's go back to our example today. If I have AI with cognitive that can do claims processing in 7 seconds or less than 7 seconds, how many people would that take, or how many people are involved in that process, right?
Yep.
So those people that are doing that claims processing today, or those functions or those tracking, they're going to have to be reskilled. They're going to have to think of new jobs. Now, the good thing is, as we all know, creative capitalism or destructive capitalism, whatever buzzword we want to show on it, constantly shows that as technology advances, we learn new things. And there's probably, there'll be twice as many jobs that we've never heard of today created 10 years from now. I think in the field, we always use examples of search engine optimization and marketing, right? Whoever thought of a search engine optimization as a role even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. Yeah. So how do you create these new jobs, and how do individuals create it? Certainly, if you look at the fintechs and the martechs and even the startup community that's non-technology, created, there's so many new and interesting jobs that are being created from it. So I do think there'll be big displacement. I think overall it's going to have a societal benefit to it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think we will start to see those knowledge workers, the tasks that are rules-based, process-orientated, easy to digitize, start to be fully automated fairly soon, and some obviously are already, and that will lead to displacement of some workers. Now, people are generally our best asset in businesses, right? And I think that will continue to be the case. And if you put people at the center, humans at the center, carbon labor, as it's been referred to, and you think, well, if I'm not going to require those people in claims processing, let's say, but you're not going to want to exit them from your business. You might have invested a significant amount of money. You will have done in recruiting them, in training them. They're a really important part of your business. So what do you do with them once they are not processing claims? So, and how do you understand the skill set that that individual has and map it to the workplace of the future, the role that they're best suited to be doing, which is not, if it's not claims processing. And I think there's a real opportunity, there's a real demand for organizations to understand their workforce better now, understand the impact that technology is inevitably going to have on some of their business functions, and to be able to map the qualities of those individuals onto their roles in the future. Because you want to keep them. You just want to employ them in better roles, right? If you think of bank tellers, back in when ATMs came into, when it became mainstream back in the 80s, you would have thought that bank tellers would have lost their jobs, right? They would have all been displaced because suddenly we were going to a hole in the wall rather than going into our bank to get cash. But it didn't happen at all, right? In fact, there were more bank tellers, not less bank tellers. They were just doing different things. You would go to see them and they might want to support you with your changing accounts, or support you with a mortgage, or support you with insurance, or whatever it might be. It was only when online banking really came to fruition that the number of bank tellers started to decline. So we're going to see claims processors turn into customer service representatives, or even turn into, software developers, whatever it might be. But how do we understand the qualities of the people that we've got in claims processing to map them onto the roles of the future? And I think that's a really important task for businesses to undertake now.
I think it's an incredibly interesting topic for a host of reasons. I would argue, though, let's say that AXA or Allianz, big European insurance providers, come up with a secret sauce. One of them comes up with a secret sauce and says, okay, we can now process claims in under 5 minutes for everything that we do.
Yeah.
And that becomes a big competitive differentiator. And they automate to the extent that they displace a lot of workers, right?
Yeah.
So they've lowered their cost of claims by X, and X is a big percentage. Well, they've got a huge market competitive advantage now, right? So isn't there going to be natural market pressure for Zurich, Prudential, Generali, AXA to automate at a similar level to get their claims processing or their systems at the same level? So I think there is going to be this natural build, just like we're seeing with data, that at some point you sort of reach this tipping point and there will be displacement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you got to say on those skill sets, where do they go throughout the rest of the economy?
Yeah.
Maybe one of these, if we want to get really interesting on one of our podcasts in the future, we'll do the political aspects of it, right? Do we need a universal basic income?
Absolutely.
What do you think about the new things? But let's not go into those types of topics. That would be not what we want to do with this one. But as we think through sort of those changes, then you got to say, what does that broader economy mean? And this is where there's so much technology being integrated in. Certainly reskilling is going to be much easier as we go forward.
Yep.
If you just look at the technology impact of reskilling, you now have AR, VR that significantly accelerate the learning process.
Yep.
Study after study shows how it can be integrated. You have things like LinkedIn Learning, where huge universities and Coursera bringing the world's knowledge to the individual.
Yeah.
I can sit here in Guildford, UK, and take a course from Stanford or MIT or University of Pennsylvania or Oxford or Cambridge, many of the world's, greatest universities. And that knowledge is almost free.
Yeah.
So as individuals, we're probably more empowered than ever to reinvent ourselves, to learn things, unlearn new things, relearn things. Corporation certainly has a part in that because they make these things available. But we as individuals have so much now that we can do.
Yeah.
That wasn't there even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, Coursera 5 years ago was just starting. So it is a incredibly interesting time.
And I think that requires a cultural shift for us as workers, because we've been programmed to go to school for 15 years, to go to college for 5 years, whatever it might be, 3, 4, 5 years, and we come out with a knowing what our career is. We want to be an accountant. We want to be a doctor or whatever. And even as kids, people will say, what are you going to be when you grow up, right? As if you've got one career choice. And that's the way it's always been. And so we're now entering into a workplace where I don't think you're going to have a single career. You're going to have a number of different jobs throughout your lifetime. And that takes me on to the gig economy, right? So you will have choices. You won't just have one job at a time. You'll have multiple jobs potentially at the same time. And that's what we are seeing, as well as different career choices throughout your 30, 40-year career span, because you've now got access to those online tools, to those online universities, those micro courses to be able to educate yourself. But embracing that and understanding that as adults is something we've got to be reprogrammed to think about, right? You do not have a job for life or a career for life, which is an exciting opportunity for you to think, I'm going to become something else, right? It's like there used to be a TV program in the UK called Mr. Ben. And you won't know this won't work with a UK US thing, but Mr. Ben used to go into a fancy dress shop and come out in a different outfit, and that was his new job for the day. He'd be a knight or a fireman or a doctor or what have you. And I think we have opportunities now as workers to become Mr. Ben like, right? And that we can change our careers because we have the ability to learn very quickly using, as you say, all the digital techniques to enable us to do that. And we have a more flexible way of working as part of the gig economy to enable ourselves to do that. But we've got to embrace it. We've got to get used to it, and we've got to start doing it, I think, because we will have to. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's so many good things about the gig economy in so many areas. You know, if you just think about reusing an asset and whether that asset is a car or your skills or whatever that asset may be, and sharing that in a gig economy is incredible. So I can jump on Topcoder and be a software developer at night, and in the morning I can be a Deliveroo guy. Yeah. And I can have 10 to 15 jobs. And I think it does change how we change. And if I just look at the mobile device, and what that one device has changed to connect us all. Yeah. So I now know that, you want your pizza delivered at this time on Friday night. So I know that I can jump on and do a Topcoder job or some other thing. It's just so incredible what we can do. And I think you're right. My kids and your kids, they're going to have 15 jobs. It's not a single employer for life. It's not a single career. Yeah. It's multiple things. Yeah. There is a downside to that, though, on benefits and other things and what it means from a society standpoint. But it's quite fascinating how that whole economy has changed, what enterprises are able to do. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a topic we could carry on talking about for another hour. We could. It's fascinating. Or two. But I think just for the sake of our listeners, we need to wrap it up. So let me finish by asking you a question on whether you think the technology that we are seeing transform business and the impact that that's having on people and their jobs. And we've discussed that over the last 30 minutes or so. But ultimately, do you think technology is going to have a positive impact on the future of work or a negative impact on the future of work? Easy answer for me. I think it's going to be an overall net positive. I think there's so much more good that's going to come from the impact on technology because of the future of work. Freeing up capacity to think is critical, not only for knowledge workers, but everybody in this. And technology is doing that. It's giving us that time to have deeper thought and be much more strategic in how we think about things, not only from a leader standpoint, but all the way through the organization. And I think in general, it's going to make it fun, and it continues to make it fun and interesting and interactive and all the things that you want. When you can bring your home and work together and the same technology we apply, it makes it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm really positive about the future and the way technology can enhance us as humans as opposed to replace us as humans. It's very easy to take a Luddite view to say, well, I'm in claims processing now. My job's going to be replaced by a computer. It's going to be automated. Oh dear, what am I going to do? Well, there's so many different things you could do. It's so exciting and it's so easy to retrain now, exactly. as we've discussed. And because we are humans, we are so far ahead of technology right now in so many of the things that we do, whether that's physical or even cognitive. But because we have empathy, we have creativity, because we can understand what is going on in somebody else's head by looking them in the eye. All of those things that are required for us as humans in the workplace, we need to accentuate those skills, focus on those skills, focus on being human and using technology to enhance us and to support us. So I'm not so worried about technology replacing our jobs. I'm excited about the opportunity technology gives us to do things differently and to do things better.
Well said.
So I think we're going to finish on a positive note.
I think so. I like that.
We're both positive about the future. So thank you to our listeners for tuning in. I hope you found it interesting. To learn more about how technology is changing the way we work, please go to isg-1.com. Please join us for our next episode. In the next episode, we're going to be exploring exactly how artificial intelligence is transforming businesses and how it's set to disrupt entire industries. So thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.